Okay guys, so welcome back. So I'm happy to show you that we have done all the steps for both the sign up and the sign in flows. So now, as I've said in the previous video, we're just going to do a few aesthetic things and also do the authorization, which should be really fun. Okay, so back in code, so what we need to do first is to fix our navigation bar, where we want to show different options depending on whether the user is signed in or signed out. So just to refresh our memories a bit, so I've opened this our site, and now if I log in, I believe that password is test. Okay, it is. So now what we want to do first of all is we want to change this navbar. So we don't want it to read home, sign up and signed in. Instead we want that navbar to read home, dashboard and logout. So let's see how we can do that. Okay, so first of all I want to show you something that passport.js did for us. So let's this is as good place as any. So the passport.js has modified this request object for us, and in case the user is logged in, we have access to this request.user, which contains the data about the currently logged in user. So out of curiosity, let us simply console.log that object out so you can see the contents of it. So I'll type request.user and then print it out like this. Let me refresh the server and let me directly try to access this URL without me being logged in. So as you can see, when we're not logged in, this request.user says that it is undefined. But if we log in and see what happens, then you see that this request.user contains all of this data for us. So one way that we can tell whether someone is logged in or not is to check whether this request.user isn't undefined. And if that isn't undefined, we know that the user is currently logged in. So let's do that. So what we want to do is similarly to how we handled the flash messages. So we registered them as locals. So one is called success messages, the other is called error messages. And then in our layout file over here we can check if there is any success message, let's show them, and if there is any error message, let's display that one instead. So we'll do something similar. So we want to create a new local over here, and let's call it like is authenticated, like this. And what we need to do, well, we need to check whether the request.user actually exists, or in other words isn't undefined, and if that is the case we want to assign the actual content of it, otherwise we want to return null, like this. Alternatively, you could also do this, true or false. So maybe we want to go with this approach where we just want a boolean value whether the user is authenticated or not. So with that said, let us copy this this name over here, and then let us find navbar file over here in the view folder. So if you take a look in the partials folder, we have footer and navbar, and let's open the navbar. Okay, and inside of this navbar we can see that I've already put this code in place, which I forgot. So let me remove this and then we can reconstruct it together. So we had this. Okay, so this is what we had. This is what we saw when we went on the page ourselves. So now let's use that. Pretend that you just didn't see that part, otherwise that wouldn't be too interesting for you. So what we want to do is, these are our three default options, and first of all let me show you something. Let's simply output the is authenticated value. Okay, so now what we can do is we can restart the server once again, open the site, refresh it, and then you see this false over here. Well, that's the is authenticated value, and if I sign in, test, we can see that that is a true. So now let's put that to use. So now we are using this handlebars templating system. You may or may not be familiar with it, but this part shouldn't be too hard. Basically, we want to write if-else statement inside of this .handlebars file. So what we want to do is the way handlebars does it. We need to use this sign and then type if and then some condition. Then we can write in the similar manner else, and then we can close it off by typing this slash and then if, like to close the first if. And then we can put corresponding code between them. So what we want to do is, in case user isn't authenticated, we want to display these three options like this. Okay, so like what we have currently. But if the user is authenticated, we still want to show home button. We can then show, let me just get rid of this, we can then show the dashboard, and then we want to show the logout. Now the logout still doesn't exist, but we will make it. The dashboard should point to users/dashboard, and the logout should point to users/logout, like this. Okay, and now if I restart the server once again and I refresh this site of ours, okay, so we're not logged in and we see this. Once we log in, we see a different navbar, which is super awesome if you ask me, and this is exactly what we want. So now we can navigate between them, but let us implement this logout button, because right now that page doesn't exist. Okay, so let us go back in the user.js file inside of the routes folder, and let us write a new okay, I can get rid of this, a new route for this. So I'm going to type router.route slash logout, like this, and then we want to have a get request, and then what needs to happen is, let's first of all create our fat arrow function. Okay, and what needs to happen is we pretty much need to call request.logout. So this is another thing that Passport provides for us. So request.logout. There is also login, but that is called automatically for us when we use passport.authenticate over here. So we can call request.logout like this, and that will log out the currently logged in user. But what we also might want to do is maybe we want to inform the user about that logout. So we can use request.flash. We can say, well, that is a success, that was user's intent, so we can say successfully logged out, hope to see you soon, like this. And then we just need to redirect them to some page, so we can redirect them to, say, home page. And let's try this. So again, I'll restart the server, and now if I refresh, okay, I'm logged out. Let me sign in again. Okay, I'm signed in, and if I click logout, we're now logged out. You can see the different navbar, and we see this message successfully logged out. So now what is also problematic currently is that me being logged out currently, I can just type users dashboard and I can access this super secret page, which isn't really super secret at all right now. So we need to fix that. And how can we fix that? Well, we'll write a small middleware that will check whether the user is signed in, and only if it is signed in, only then do we allow user to see this page. So let us go back in this routes file, and up above somewhere here, let's write that authorization function. So let us call it is authenticated, and then that is going to be a function, so request response next. I'm using a fat arrow functions, but you could use normal functions as well. So what we want to do is to ask if request is authenticated. So we are going to use this request.isAuthenticated function. Now you could again use this one. I'm just showing you different ways to do the same thing. So we'll do it with this, and then I'll switch this to use request.user, so you can see that it still works the same. So this will just return to us true or false depending on whether the user is authenticated or not. So if the user is authenticated, that's good. We want to continue then. And how can we continue? Well, by returning next, and then it will proceed on to call the next middleware in line. Otherwise, if that's not the case, we want to flash an error message and then redirect user to say homepage. So request.flash error, and let's say that sorry, but you must be registered first, like this. Again, feel free to put the messages you want, and then we simply want to redirect to the homepage like this. Now this isn't really too useful until we actually use it, so copy the name of this function, and when we come to this route /dashboard, and then this .get function specifically, we want to call this middleware before we call this code over here. So it's kind of a gatekeeper, so to speak. So the request will first hit this, is authenticated, then here it would either go to this route or this route depending on what request.isAuthenticated yields back. So if it is authenticated, we'll simply just continue on executing code. So now it will jump from here to here and everything will be as it's working right now. But in case it hits this branch, then we'll show a message and redirect before this code even gets executed at all. So that's that's how it works pretty much. So let us try that. So let me restart this server, and let us try this again. And as you can see right now, it doesn't work. So we can't see that page unless we're logged in. And just to show you that we could use request user as well, I'm going to modify this with request.user, save, restart the server, and let us try that again. And again we see the same thing. So I'm just going to change that to request is authenticated just for a variety sake. Okay, so now this is good. One thing that you also might noticed is that on the dashboard page we have this username and then blank. So what I want to demonstrate with this, how you can use actually the user's data on this view layer. So what we can do is we can go here where we render the dashboard view, and then we can pass another argument to this render function, and that argument is going to be an object, and then this object, then to this object we can provide stuff that we want to be visible on that view layer. So for example, we could create a property called username, and then we can actually assign the user's username to this property. Now how can we do that? Well, if you remember, request.user has all the user's data, so we can just pick that username property from that, and then we just need to remember how we called it over here. So now inside of a dashboard you can see I already did that, but what you need to do is pretty much use handlebars with this notation and simply put in here the name that you gave over here. So right now if I was to refresh this, to restart the server, and I refresh the site and I sign in, we can now see that username is codeworker. So another thing that we can do is if you imagine, like, what if I try to access a register page right now? You see that it works, which it really shouldn't, because we are already logged in, as you can tell from this navbar. So, like, opposite of the dashboard, there are a couple of pages that we only want to restrict access to in case user isn't logged in or isn't signed in. So that'll be quite easy. So basically we want to create opposite function of this pretty much. So let me just copy that and paste it over here, and let's call it is not authenticated. And then what we want to do is pretty much the reverse. So if the user is authenticated, we don't want to allow that page to happen, so let us show that error over there. But if it isn't authenticated, then we want to let him proceed. So in case it is authenticated, maybe we want to say sorry, but you are already logged in, and leave everything else as is. So now let's put this function to use. So okay, so we have this register. We want to only show register in case user isn't logged in, and there is a login which we also want to show only in case the user isn't already logged in, and logout should only be available if the user is authenticated, so like this. Okay, now let's test all of that. So I'm going to restart the server once again, and if I open the page now, let's put all of that to test. So right now we're not logged in. Let's log in or sign in. Sorry, I'm using them interchangeably. So code worker test. Okay, we are logged in. We can see this dashboard page. What about register page? Cool, so we can't access it because we're logged in. What about the login page? Great, we can't access that one as well, but we can access logout. Now what happens if we are logged out, but we try to force to log out again? So I type user/logout, and we can see again, sorry, but you must be registered first. And then if I try to sign up now, that works. But if I try to go users slash dashboard, that doesn't work. So as you can see, I think we've covered like all the scenarios, and you can see it's pretty easy. Like once you have these two functions, you can pretty much like restrict or allow anything you want. Now in the beginning I also said how the database interaction is just one portion of all of this, so it wouldn't be the end of the world if you use this tutorial and like exchange database for something else. So like this file would be different, the model, like depending on your database of choice, but after that file only some like small interaction, like this thing over here and like this thing over here. So it's still like a database agnostic. You would need to do some modifications, yeah, that's for sure, but as you can see, like only it's like loosely coupled. Like you only have a few calls to actually try to find that user, and over here inside of the post and the register, again similar code. You just try to find that user from the database, but that's pretty much it. And okay, also over here. So that's just like one thing. If you have any plans like to learn some other database or to switch this with some other, this could be like a good challenge for yourself. The majority of code should still be the same. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I hope you enjoyed this series, and that now the authentication with Node makes maybe a bit more sense, and that you learned something new, and that I'll see you in some of my next series. Thanks for watching, and congratulations for coming this far.